So let's move into some of the things that do work. Now, this next session, this next portion is what I believe is the key, the absolute most important. That's why I'm putting it at the beginning of this talk, because I think if you can get a hold of this, 90% of your disciplinary problems will be solved. It is the key that most people just don't remember is so vitally important to classroom management. They perceive it as a teaching. They don't perceive it as classroom management, and that's why I want to get this through your head. Really, 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 really important. Preparation and presentation. It's not managing the behavior that's the problem. It's you giving them something that they're interested in. You put on a good show for them, or they will put on a good show for you. If you don't prepare something dynamic, they can tell. They get bored. You can't get upset with a child for acting like a child. They're not acting out because they're misbehaving. 90% of the time, they're acting out because they're bored. And if they're bored, it's not their fault. We need to give them something dynamic and interesting. It needs to be well prepared. And there's some keys to helping that happen. The first of which is, this is the main event, the number one key to discipline. Most kids act out because they're bored. If they're bored, it's not their fault. So here's what you have to do: prepare. You need to wrap your head around something. Gone are the days when an hour before class you are opening up the book to see what you need to do today. You should be praying about this and digesting it all week long. You should have had your supplies ready long before the day of your ministry, because if they see you organizing your supplies, they know you're not ready. If the first time you are reading that lesson is an hour before you get up in front of the kids, you are not going to be able to give them something that you've digested, that you know, that you can give them in your own words, because when you have those pauses, yeah, see, even now, your attention just wandered. When you have those moments where you're trying to collect your supplies for the next thing that you've got to bring up onto stage, all the kids now have to decide where to put their attention, because watching you get ready is not going to entertain them. So if you're not prepared ahead of time with all of your supplies laid out, ready to go, they are going to fill that void, those pauses, those moments where you're searching for your words, those times when you're waiting for the next segment to come up. They're going to get that sense of, there's nothing going on, I need to create something to do. You have to prepare ahead of time. Every portion of your lesson. And if you teach with other people in an environment where multiple presenters are present, you have to make sure that all of them are also prepared and ready for whatever it is they're doing. Second thing is that you need to give them something dynamic. You cannot be a talking head in front of them. You cannot stand in front of them and just read something. You can't just get up there and tell them a story. It's just not interesting to a kid whose eyes and ears are used to constant streaming, high quality stimulation. You have to give them something to look at, something to do, something to involve them, or they will not be able to engage in what you're doing. Just talking is a guarantee that they are not going to hear anything you say. So you have to have something dynamic. You have to have, use object lessons, use puppets, use skits, use crafts, use games, use things that involve them, that excite them, that interest them, because if you don't, they're going to act out in natural ways. Prepared and dynamic. Next, eliminate those pauses and dead time. Eliminate pauses and dead time. You do that best by having something dynamic, well prepared, but you have to actually pay attention to it when you're speaking, and especially if you have more than one presenter in the room, whether you co-teach with another person in a Sunday school classroom or if you're in a kids' church room with 3 or 4 teachers, you have to be able to know that there's not going to be a pause. When you are doing a game, If you've only got 4 kids out of the room playing a game on the stage in front of everybody, you can't let dead time happen. You can't say, okay, I'm going to explain it to these 4 kids while the rest just kind of watch. You have to address the kids. Oh, and now I'm going to do a running commentary on who's winning, who's losing, who just passed the ball fastest, and who do you think is going to win? Let's cheer for the girls. You know, you have to have constant sound, or else they're going to see that as an open gate for their attention to wander into other areas or distract themselves with somebody next to them. So you need to eliminate those pauses. Eliminate that dead time. When you are well prepared, you can tell the story without pausing to think about what you're going to say, without pausing to go back through your notes and see what you missed. It's okay to miss things in your notes. It is okay to skip things out of the curriculum because you forgot about them. As long as you get the main point across, just keep talking. And when you see their attention wandering, stop talking and move on. Don't let your pauses and dead time give their attention time to wander. That also means that people who are multiple teachers have to watch for that cue that this lesson is wrapping up. I should be gathering my supplies so that I can be waiting in the wings, so that when that person says, all right, what's next, I am less than 2 seconds away from being the next thing on that stage in front of those kids or whatever your environment looks like. You need to be prepared for being the next person on deck, because if they've got to wait for this person to gather their supplies, move out of the way so that the next person can come up and set up their thing, you've already lost them. So that's dead time has to be instantaneous, and that will allow you to retain control over the room without them wandering off and you got to go regather their attention. Another thing, we have now talked about what not to do. We've talked about preparation and presentation, which is the most important. The next most effective means of classroom management is just clear expectations. Clear expectations will solve so many problems. You cannot yell at a kid for not doing something you never told them to do. You can't get upset with a child for doing stuff you never told them was unacceptable. So you have to lay down some clear expectations right at the beginning. And to be honest, those expectations are entirely dependent on your style, your environment, your kids, your resources. So really, you get to write them however you want, as long as they're clear. So communicate the schedule. That's especially helpful for kids with special needs. If you've got kids who are autistic or ADHD, having that schedule, even if it's just verbally stated, and next we're going to do this before we do that. That simple statement will help that kid. How many of you go to a conference, a meeting, or something, and the first thing you look at is the schedule? You're like, I want to know what's next and how long it's going to take and when I'm going to be out of here. Because you need to know what's going to happen so you know how long you have before the next transition. Kids need it even more. So whether you post it on the wall, state it at the beginning in class, or list it on a sheet of paper, whatever you do, make sure that the kids know what to expect when they walk in. Know how long it's going to take. Know when the next thing is going to happen. Know how long it's going to be before their snack or their craft or dismissal. That'll help them process what they're supposed to be doing in the moment. The other thing is to communicate the rules, the expectations of what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. As much as possible, try to make those positive. Instead of saying don't talk, frame it in please listen. Instead of don't touch your neighbor, say respect the person next to you. There are positive ways to frame most things. It's like we sit in here instead of saying don't run. So in here, we expect you to listen to the things that are happening in front of you. Respect the person next to you and have fun. So those are just simple, clear expectations so that when a kid is poking the kid next to him, you can say, oh, that's not very respectful to the person next to you. You wouldn't want them poking you. Or when they stand up to walk out of the room, you can say, oh, remember one of our rules was to have a seat? And with those rules are clear, consequences as well. So you can say, well, if you forget the rules, number one, we'll remind you. We'll just say, oh, you forgot. We're supposed to sit and listen. And the second consequence is if you still keep doing what we say you can't, you will have to move your chair. Maybe it's the people sitting next to you that are distracting you. We'll just move you to a different seat. Third time, we just talk to your parents and let them know that you are having trouble so that they can help you for next time. So whatever your consequences are, this is just one example of a type of consequence, but if you lay out clear rules and clear consequences, then you can follow through with those and they will know what to expect and they won't feel unfairly judged when you call them out on it. Okay, so we talked about what doesn't work. Preparation and presentation, which is the most important. Clear expectations, now follow through. It's one thing to say the rules. It's a very different thing to follow through. It is uncomfortable to confront people. That is just a fact of life. You will face discomfort when confronting people. And when you want to be friends with the kids and it's a little bit inconvenient or uncomfortable to call them out on every single thing, sometimes you let a few of them slide. Now it's true, you do have to kind of pick your battles, and if a kid just talks to the kid next to him for a couple of seconds to make a comment about what's already going on, they're already engaging, they just wanted to make a comment to their friend about what's happening, yeah, you can pick your battles. You don't have to immediately jump on every single thing, but you can't just let misbehavior continue. You can't just wait until it gets out of hand. If a kid gets up and starts to walk out of the room, you have to say, oh, I'm sorry, we can't do that here. We have to sit and listen, because if you get up and walk out, we don't know where you are. We don't know that you're safe. We have to care for you. So why don't you have a seat, and if you want to, you can raise your hand and maybe then we can let you go. You have to be immediate. One of the environments in which I sometimes teach is Royal Rangers classrooms, which is a mentorship club for boys in which boys gather in a classroom and we have to teach them something. It was in fact just 2 weeks ago that I was teaching them tool craft, which involved how to properly and safely handle knives. Yes, I gave a group of boys sharp knives and taught them how to use it. Do you think I could have any compromise in that environment if a kid decided to try something that I had already said is unsafe? You have to jump on it. That room was safe. That room had clear expectations. And when I saw somebody starting to stray out of the safety zone, I had to say, okay, that action is not safe. Let's call that back in. And I was ready and willing to stop whatever was happening to immediately intervene. And that's the kind of attitude that you have to have in a room, because there's an old principle that it's debatable whether there's scientific merit to it, but it's called the broken window principle. And the theory was that if you want to uplift a community, the first thing you need to do is deal with the small stuff, not the big stuff. Instead of dealing with the murders and the drug trafficking and things like that, you need to focus on the graffiti and the jaywalking and the broken windows in the factory district. If you fix those windows, you're going to tell the community those little things are unacceptable. We don't want vandalism in our town. We don't want broken windows. If it's nothing but broken windows and vandalism all over town, well, all that's going to say is we're willing to compromise. And if you fix the broken windows and the graffiti first, then suddenly those bigger things seem like major things. And so we say, little things, let's nip that in the bud before it gets to be out of hand. And if you can do that, especially with the ringleaders, you know who those ringleaders are in your room that kind of draw the room into chaos. If you can address those immediately and say, I'm not going to let you do that twice. I'm going to address it the first time, so that you know we mean what we say when we say these rules and consequences. That'll help a lot. The other thing with follow through is to restate the expectations that were verbalized. When you're following through, don't just tell them that was unacceptable. State the rule that you've already established ahead of time so that they know what expectation they're supposed to remember next time. It's like, oh, justly bringing you to recall the thing we've already said. So, oh, you can't poke your neighbor. Remember what we said at the beginning, you have to respect others, and I will protect you if other people try to bother you as well. When you restate that expectation, oh, remember when we said at the beginning, the consequence for doing this more than once is to move your seat. I think maybe the people around you might be distracting you, so let's move you to this chair over here, where I think you can pay attention a little better. So you can exchange something that they already understand. It doesn't feel unfair. It doesn't feel like you're picking on them. It feels like you're enforcing something that you've already stated. And kids do crave consistency and honesty with the adult. So if you said, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable, it really brings them much comfort when their authorities follow through with what they said they were going to follow through with. And the last thing in follow-through is how you deliver that message. And I will say the easiest way to establish how you follow through is smile. Kids are already being yelled at school, especially the troublemakers. They're being yelled at home. If they get it at church, they're not going to want to come back. Church should be a safe environment that they want to come back. And so usually, if you can say it with a smile, you're not using your angry face, you're not using your angry voice, you're using your loving voice, your loving face. And so when somebody misbehaves, instead of, that's the angry face, you can give them this face. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything. In fact, usually in my kids' church environment, where all of our kids, kindergarten through 5th grade, are together, that's all I have to do. From the opposite side of the room, I just get their attention and I say, but see, with a smile on your face, you're telling them, I still like you. I'm not angry with you. So if you can say it with a smile, now I'm not saying you should smile if a kid's punching another kid in the face. What I'm saying is when you deliver it with kindness, that smile is just one check in your spirit that'll allow you to say it with kindness so that you don't upset the child and give them another reason to act out. So, we've talked about what doesn't work, preparation and presentation, expectations, and follow through. Here's another tool that you can stick into your toolbox. It's incentives. Incentives are positive things that you can give the kids when they do it right. And you can just out of the gate assume every kid is doing it right and start with reward. That's how God did it. God always blessed before he disciplined. He said, I'm going to give you a blessing on faith that you are going to listen and obey to what I have to say. Now, it didn't always work, and that's why we have the follow through and the rules and the consequences. But grace and gift always precede discipline and punishment. So, there are some keys to doing incentives right. First of all, you have to avoid favoritism. Now, favoritism goes in both directions. Sometimes we favor those well-behaved kids and pile so many rewards on them that the kids who have difficulty behaving feel like they will never measure up to the goody kids. I am not enough. I am not good. I am less than. And we have to be really careful that if we're going to create an environment where there are incentives, that we're not going to show favoritism to those kids who spend extra time being good or came from an environment where being good is a lot easier. You need to make sure that you carefully craft your incentives not to always be putting candy in the lap of the good kids. You need to either give corporate rewards or allow opportunity to focus in on one kid at a time if they behave or don't, instead of just saying every kid that behaves, the goody two-shoes kids. So the opposite can also be true of favoritism, where you always give attention to the kids who are not listening, and the kids who behave all the time kind of get ignored because they're not causing any trouble. Sometimes you focus so much on that kid, like, oh, you know, you misbehave every week, but this week, if you do this or that, you can get a sucker. Well, what about the kid that's been behaving every single week? Where's his sucker, you know? So you can give other options that will not single out a single group or individual for favoritism. So let me show you how to do that. First of all, there's verbal affirmation. Verbal affirmation is an incentive. Kids crave it more than candy and toys. If you can tell a kid, you have value, you did it right, I'm proud of you, you did great today. Sometimes with those troublemaking kids, it's hard to find those nuggets of affirmation that you can praise that. Believe me, one of them lives in my own household. It's easy to sometimes try to wait for that big win of you'd had a great day, but sometimes you need to focus on the little wins like, oh, I noticed that during that one lesson, you were listening the whole time. I'm proud of you. Keep it up. So you give those verbal affirmations. You know what, kids? You have done such a good job today. I am proud of every single one of you. Not one of you disrupted the class today, and we were able to have so much fun. When you give that verbal affirmation to a kid or to a group, it's like candy to their soul. It's much better than handing them a physical incentive. So the best way that you can give some kind of an incentive is just be eager to give that verbal affirmation. But the other thing that you can do is physical incentives. Now, everybody knows these. These are the easy ones. It's candy, it's a treasure chest, it's a secret seat prize. Okay, I've picked out a seat in the room somewhere, and if the person sitting in that chair behaves the whole time and listens, I will give them candy. But you don't know who it is. It might be you, it might be the person next to you, so make sure that you're listening the whole time in case you're sitting in the secret seat. You know, you give them a treasure chest or candy at the end. Now, there is value in doing it that way. It's an old trick, but it works. Kids like candy. They like grabbing something out of the treasure chest. They like getting Bible bucks or Jesus dollars or whatever you do in your room to give them something to look forward to. And it's okay. Sometimes you need that external incentive before it becomes an internal motivation. I used to read my Bible and pray for the prize I'd get in kids' church. But when it became a habit, I found I loved it. And I wanted to read my Bible and pray more, not so that I can get the prize, but because I enjoyed the positive impact it had on my life. And you can do the same thing in your environment. Listening, you may listen just because you want that verbal affirmation or that piece of candy, but eventually it becomes a habit. It becomes what they perceive as normal for the room. So don't be afraid to give out the prizes, but if you are giving out food, make sure you're sensitive to kids' food sensitivities, you know, whether their parents like giving them candy in the day, or some people do, some people don't. But you know your kids and your environment better to know what kind of prizes to give out and how often. But the other thing that a lot of people overlook are called token incentives. So if you're talking about giving kids prizes, you don't have a big budget or you don't want to give them candy, well, there are token incentives. A token incentive is to give the kids something that actually intrinsically has no value. It can be Bible bucks, it can be marbles, it can be a hash line on the chart, it can be stickers. They don't have any intrinsic value. But when you give it value, when you assign it value by saying, hey, look how many stickers so-and-so got on their chart, that gives them that sense of, oh, this is important, this is valuable. Why are Pokemon cards valuable? Is the card stock valuable? Was it the artwork was excellent on the card? What about a baseball card? Is it because that player was a good player that that card is worth so much? No, it's because somebody assigned value to it. Somebody decided, I want that, and I'm willing to pay money for that. And because that person liked it and wanted it and was recognized for it, somebody else says, oh, I want that recognition. I want that joy that they got from that thing. Therefore, I want that more. And now this thing has increased in value, not because of its intrinsic worth, but because people want it. You want it literally because people want it. Now, if you have a jar in your class, and every time we have a good day, we put marbles in the jar. And every time somebody decides to disrupt the class, we remove from the jar. And when the jar gets filled up, we have a pizza party, or everybody gets a piece of candy, or maybe it's Bible bucks. We've got a toy store in the back with cheap little Oriental trading prizes. And oh, you get 5 Bible bucks for answering that question. Good job paying attention. So you give them this meaningless piece of paper that then later they can save up or add up or bring to the back and spend it on cheap toys and prizes, and you can assign the value of those Bible bucks and how many candies or whatever they need and they can get with it. So you can actually spend less money and less effort on the prizes themselves and just hand out the tokens. Whether it's stickers on a chart, hashtags on a chart, marbles, Bible bucks. You don't have to give them anything of value. You have to give them something that recognizes that they did it right. And those can add up to physical prizes later, whether that be a party or a prize from the treasure chest or whatever. But those token incentives have just as much power as the actual candy and toys themselves.